Good evening and welcome to the outreach event for the Senator competition, which is to be launched shortly. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lindsay Montgomery and I'm the lay chairing member for JABS. The programme sets out our speakers for this event, and we have the Lord President, Lady Haldane, Lady Ross and Cheryl D. Emidio, and I'm most grateful for them agreeing to take part. Everyone attending who wishes to be anonymous should be so if they followed the joining instructions. We have provided for our Q&A section for the event. If questions do occur to you during the event, please put them into the chat. They'll be read out at that stage and hopefully answered. On the other hand, if questions occur to you later, you can send them to us at mailbox@jabs.gov.scot. and we'll add them and the answers to the frequently asked questions, which will be available to everyone. So I hope you enjoy the event, and I'll now hand you over to Lord President, Lord Pentland. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lord Pentland, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to contribute to this outreach event. And I would like to congratulate the Judicial Appointments Board for Scotland for organising it. I do hope that everybody finds the evening interesting and helpful, and that it will enable you to consider whether you wish to apply to become a Senator of the College of Justice. I would like to say a few words about the skills and the attributes required of a Senator and explain why it is such a professionally rewarding and enjoyable role. I myself have been a Senator of the College of Justice for 17 years. I had previously been in practice at the bar for 26 years. My practice was mainly a mixed civil one, latterly in commercial law and public law. I had been an advocate depute and a law officer. I recall that when I started as a judge, an experienced senior judicial colleague said to me, "You will be surprised how different the new job is, and that is one of the best things about it." At the time, I'm not sure that I really grasped what he was saying, but I came to appreciate that he was absolutely right. Essentially, you step out of the ring. You're no longer focused on winning, but on the very different task of finding the right answer or supporting the jury to perform that responsibility. To a far greater degree than when one is in practice, the public service element becomes prominent. Moreover, you find yourself now in a more directly public-facing role. Finally, everything you do is imbued with the overriding requirement to ensure that each case is handled in a manner that promotes the rule of law and delivers a fair and just outcome. Discharging these responsibilities is often challenging, but it is also satisfying and fulfilling. The other aspect that is perhaps not always fully appreciated is the particularly wide variety of work which the job offers. A judicial career as a senator can take you in numerous interesting and sometimes unexpected directions. These include sitting in specialist courts and tribunals, as well as in the Court of Session and the High Court of Justiciary. The work is varied and interesting. You may encounter areas of the law in which you have limited experience. That is part of the challenge. The role offers unique opportunities for professional development. To give you a flavour of this, when I started, I wanted to do as much work in the High Court as I could, because that is where I felt I had the most to learn. Looking back on those early years, it was excellent experience for building up judicial skills. The cases were interesting, and there were countless legal points to be resolved. One had to make a lot of decisions quite quickly. At one stage, I was a preliminary hearing judge in the High Court. That was an opportunity to become involved in case management, and I gained a great deal of experience of sentencing and of the detailed workings of criminal procedure. Alongside the criminal work, I sat regularly in the outer house of the Court of Session, hearing a wide variety of interesting cases. I did a lot of judicial review hearings. For a time, I was an intellectual property judge. Then I became chair of the Scottish Law Commission. Later, I was the administrative judge in the outer house and in the inner house. In those roles, I learned a great deal about how the Supreme Courts work. It is very much part of my aim to ensure that every senator has similar opportunities to develop a broad judicial career. Outside the courtroom, there are opportunities to become involved in a wide range of interesting projects on an administrative and strategic level, from responding to government proposals for reform to working alongside court service colleagues to improve the way the courts function at a practical level, such as serving on the Civil Justice Council or the Criminal Rules Council or the Scottish Courts and Tribunals Service Board. Senators serve in a wide variety of other roles. For example, as I have mentioned, chair of the Scottish Law Commission, or deputy chair of the Boundary Commission for Scotland, or from time to time as chair of a public inquiry, or to serve on the Judicial Appointments Board for Scotland. Senators currently hold office as President of the Employment Appeal Tribunal and as President of the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. Both those appointments reflect the particularly high standing of the senior Scottish judiciary at a United Kingdom level. There are opportunities also to become involved in the development and delivery of judicial training through the Judicial Institute. One point I would stress is that whatever court you happen to be sitting in as a senator, the key aspect is that the work is legally challenging. You will often find yourself at the cutting edge of the development of the civil law and of criminal law. Whether sitting in the High Court, the Court of Session, the Upper Tribunal, or anywhere else, the central feature of the job is that you will have to be able to bring legal analysis to bear and to work out the right solution to complex legal problems. So one has to have a genuine interest in the law, be able to undertake complex legal analysis, and be able to write well-reasoned judgments timelessly. You may at times have to work under pressure and to be resilient in the face of this. Overall, a senator requires to have exceptional skills in the analysis, interpretation, and application of the law. I can say with confidence that all my judicial colleagues find the public service aspect of the role to be particularly rewarding. To take one example, playing a central part in ensuring that a criminal trial in the High Court is properly and fairly conducted is intellectually and personally challenging. Members of the public serving on juries, persons accused of serious crime, victims, and witnesses all place their trust in the judge to ensure that justice is properly served. This is a heavy responsibility. Ensuring that those public expectations are met is not only vital for our society, it is fulfilling on a personal level. We provide first-class arrangements for induction and training, as well as a highly collegiate atmosphere of mutual support. There's a tried and tested mentoring scheme, and one has the opportunity to sit on the bench with an experienced judge. The induction includes extensive practical guidance and an introduction to resources, ensuring that whatever your personal and professional background may be, you can commence, conduct, and conclude a jury trial in the High Court with confidence. There's also a comprehensive programme of continuous training provided for all senators by the Judicial Institute. In recent times, this has been significantly improved and strengthened. Overall, there is a great deal of excellent support available. You will find that your judicial colleagues are friendly, welcoming and keen to help you. Our court staff are exceptionally professional, supportive and loyal. They are dedicated to providing the senators with the very best support and, where appropriate, expert guidance. And we are very fortunate in that respect. So I am delighted that you are interested in considering becoming a Senator of the College of Justice in Scotland. It is a highly rewarding and stimulating role. There are opportunities to contribute to the development of Scots law and to provide important public service as a member of a modern and outward-facing judiciary and court service. The work is challenging, fulfilling, and enjoyable. Over recent months, the Lord Justice Clerk, Lord Beckett, and I have been speaking individually to all the Outer House judges to discuss career development and to see how they're getting on. One point that has come across very strongly to us is how positive they all feel about the job, whatever their background. Everyone derives a great deal of satisfaction from what they're doing. If you consider that you have the necessary skills and attributes, I would encourage you to apply. I'll now hand back to Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Lord Penellan. So hello again. I will say a few introductory remarks about the competition, including the timetable, about the panel, and some changes we have made to the application and interview process. My colleague on JABS, Lady Haldane, will say a little bit more about our recruitment process later in the event. We've been asked to make recommendations for 5 senators for this role and part of this exercise. So let me start with timetable. We plan to launch the competition advert on Monday, the 8th of December. The advert will include links to the role profile, which describes the role of a senator and the requirements for it, a guidance note from JABS to help you complete the application, a note of frequently asked questions, including any from this evening, the recording of this event, which will be available on the JABS YouTube channel, and a link to apply for this role on our application system, GetGot, will also be included. The application window will remain open until the 7th of January. After the application period closes, we'll be undertaking shortlisting of the applications. We expect interviews to take place from the last week of February until around the 20th of March. Interviews will take place as usual at our offices in Thistle House, Edinburgh. We aim for the board's recommendations to be sent to the Scottish Government by the end of April. So, turning to the panel, and each of them will come on to the screen so you can see who we are. For our most senior roles, we have 6 members on the panel, 3 legal or judicial members and 3 lay members. For this competition, the members are Lady Haldane, Lord Weir, I hope it's going to come back on, and Jonathan Barn, KC. Our lay members are Mrs. Wilma Canning and Mr. Paul Gray. I will chair the panel. All my colleagues are attending the event and should be now visible to you. It's just to assure you we don't bite, or at least not much. The criteria against which we will be testing and assessing candidates are set out in the role profile, the guidance note, and in the application. You will be asked to provide evidence in your application which explains how you meet these criteria. There are some changes from previous senator competitions, which I thought it might be helpful to mention to you. First, we will ask you to provide a personal statement of up to 1,200 words to set out why you think you meet the competition criteria and are suitable for the role. In that, we also ask you to tell us the elements of the role which you will find to be the most challenging for you and how you would plan to address these. This section is important to us, and we take evidence from it, along with the other evidence you provide, to assess how you meet the various criteria. We introduced this section in 2 other recent competitions and found it to be very valuable. Second, there is now a section which asks you to set out your experience of various types of legal work, including the extent of your work in the Court of Session, the High Court, the Upper Tribunal, or the Sheriff Appeal Court. This provides valuable evidence of the breadth and depth of your legal experience as it relates to this role. More generally, we take a more holistic approach to considering the evidence we receive at both the application and interview stages to help us arrive at what are difficult and important decisions. Finally, we now do one interview each day for Senator. This is to give us sufficient time with the candidate to allow for suitable breaks for the candidate and the panel, and to provide sufficient time to assess and score the substantial amount of evidence provided by the candidate at interview and in their application. These are challengingly long days. Thank you for your attention, and I will return to chair the question and answer session after Lady Haldane has taken you through the application and interview process. I'll now hand you over to Lady Ross.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I've been asked to say a little about the experience of being a new senator and to offer some thoughts about my own experience of the process. Of course, when speaking at an event, it's usually a good idea to know your audience, and you are, of course, anonymous, and that's absolutely fine. You may or may not know me. I'm not going to make any assumptions about that, but I'm working on the basis that you are participating in this meeting because you're interested in applying to become a senator, and that's excellent. The short point is that I would recommend it. I will say a little bit more to expand on that. So a few reflections of my own just to start with about the application process and some points to consider in relation to that. You will, of course, hear more and in more detail from other people, but so just a couple of points there. And then I'll go on to offer some thoughts about the working life of a newly appointed senator. As I say, you will hear more. You've already heard about the process itself, and you'll hear more from others with responsibilities within JABS about the details of the process. I'm not going to go into the details, but as I say, just perhaps a couple of thoughts that you might want to consider. You may be wanting to ask yourself a number of questions, and the first and most obvious is this what I want to do? And the answer to that might be yes, definitely, or yes, maybe, or I'm not really sure. If it's definitely not, I'm not sure why you're here, but perhaps just out of interest. But even if you're just in the maybe or the not sure category, at least at this stage, that's all right. There is a lot to think about, and it is a big jump at this early stage in the process. It is a good idea really to take time for yourself to think about your reasons for applying. By that, I don't mean thinking up impressive answers to an interview question. I mean the exercise of reflecting on your own thoughts, your own strengths, your own skills, your own concerns, and doing that for yourself so that you are in a position properly to answer your own question, is this what I want to do? The process itself, filling in the form, preparing for an interview, that in itself will give you an opportunity to test your own thinking about what your skills are, about what you can bring to the job, and also what it is about the job that appeals to you. But it's important, I think, to put the effort into thinking that through at this stage. And a related question is this what I want to do now? Is this the right time? You might think that there's more that I want to do in practice. You might think that it would be a good idea to build up more experience for applying. You might think, I don't want to do this yet, but I will get on with it at some point. Only you can properly answer the question for yourself. But it's important as well, I think, that you give that proper time and proper scrutiny and ask yourself the proper questions that you need to about the level of experience that you have. But I would say if you are hesitating, bear in mind that it's a good idea not to put it off, or not to put it off for too long and assume that sometime later, years and years later, it might become apparent. Test yourself with that now. And I'd say as well as taking the time to think, do take the time to prepare. You've already heard about a little bit about what the process will involve. There is a form to fill in. There's a great deal to write. I would suggest that you shouldn't be spooked by that. You are, after all, a lawyer. Dealing with words and expressing ideas ought not to be completely foreign to you. Use your skills, assess what the form is asking you to do, but give it proper time. It's not something that you can complete in an evening and expect it to be okay. And as well, I'd say prepare for the interview and give that proper time. If you're offered an interview, make sure that you set aside a good amount of time to give it what it needs. For my part, my recollection is that I think I carved out or tried to carve out about a week before the interview so that I could give it the preparation, the time that it deserved. That's all I'm going to say about the process. Others have the information that you're going to need about that in more detail. So what then is it like? I've been in the role now for about 18 months. And I should make it clear that I'm speaking about my experience of coming from civil practice at the bar with no prior judicial experience. Of course, some of you who are listening to this may have different backgrounds, maybe even very different from that from which I have come, but it's best that I speak of what I know. First of all, I'd say this, the training, you've already heard a little bit about this from the Lord President. The training is excellent. There is a really good, thorough, quite intensive induction programme, and you'll hear more about that, I'm sure, from others as well. There's an opportunity to sit in advance of taking responsibility for trials for yourself, sitting in alongside an experienced senator in the High Court, and I certainly found that a very useful experience. There is also a good mentoring programme. That's a meaningful and substantial programme that will give you an opportunity to spend time with a senior colleague. And beyond that as well, and this is really to echo what the Lord President has said, there is ongoing support. That comes from colleagues. Ultimately, of course, you must be independent and take responsibility for your own decisions. If you're making a decision in court, it is absolutely your decision. But around that, at other times and in other circumstances, there are opportunities to discuss matters with colleagues. There is support available, and it has been my experience right from the beginning that I've found that colleagues, both at a very senior level and also those who are perhaps near contemporaries, have been supportive, in my experience, very generous with their time, their willingness to listen and to offer support. There is real kindness and a strong sense of collegiality. What then is it like? Time is limited. I'm just going to give a few, perhaps a few headline points. It is, of course, hard work. There's no getting away from it. It is demanding. It's intensive. I would say that in contrast to the bar, you probably don't encounter a judge, a senator does not encounter perhaps the same extremes of intensity of practice at the senior bar. It is a more steady experience of hard work, but it is still demanding, and it should be. It's a responsible and important job. It should be hard work, but it's in some respects it's enjoyable work. I want to say a little bit about crime in particular and the work of the High Court. As I've said, my experience, my background was coming from the senior bar as a civil practitioner. My work, largely my work was in public law, predominantly in public and administrative law, but with some experience as well of commercial work at EU law and some other aspects as well, but with very, very limited experience of the work of the High Court. What I would say is that you should not regard crime as just something awful that has to be endured. Some of it, of course, much of it is awful in the sense of dealing with the subject matter. It is, after all, serious crime. And it's something that those who are interested in the work often ask, is it bearable? Well, yes, and there are strategies, there's ways of dealing with that. One of the most important ways to think about it, in my experience, is to recognise that it is important work. It is a job that absolutely has to be done in the public interest. I'm sometimes also asked, do I enjoy it? And it's difficult to say that it's enjoyable hour by hour when you're dealing with difficult and stressful and sometimes unpleasant circumstances. But nothing, I think, comes close to the sense of satisfaction that can be derived from doing a job well, especially when it is such an important job, for whether it's for the individuals who are in court at any one time or for wider society. That in itself gives rise, I think, to a really important sense of fulfilment and satisfaction. It is also, the work of the High Court is also legally challenging. It's fast paced. Difficult issues can arise at very short notice. It is undoubtedly demanding, but there is something really satisfying in quite a fundamental way about taking responsibility for explaining the law to a jury in a way that is firstly correct in law and is also accessible to a jury. If you're coming from a civil background, please do be assured that that the structure is in place to give you training and to support you. If you bring an ability and a commitment to giving it hard work, and if you bring an open mind, then it is something that can be done and indeed can be enjoyed. And I would say, in relation to the work of the High Court and to crime, it does put an awful lot of civil work into perspective from the perspective of legal analysis, but also in respect of just the role that it has in society. As the Lord President has said, there are other opportunities. I'm not going to repeat all of that. There's the work, obviously, of the commercial courts, of the family court, of the upper tribunal. For me, my experience in the last 18 months has been that I am responsible for looking after a number of judicial review cases, and that working with that alongside the High Court responsibilities is a good thing. It brings variety and an ability to maintain my skills and my interest in that area of work. Just a few other things to close. Other things that I'm often asked, are you expected to travel? Well, yes. The High Court obviously sits across the country, but again, there is good support for that, and the different environments in which one works bring opportunities for different perspectives. I'd say it's something not to worry about. In different ways, though, a couple of other reflections, and I think these are probably also echoes of comments made by the Lord President. It does change your relationship with other people. That's a natural consequence. Once you become a senator, you are in a different role. You're seen slightly differently, sometimes very differently. That can take a bit of adjusting to. It's just part of the role. There is something also about scrutiny and about working in public. If you're coming from practice, from private practice, from practice at the bar, where you're used to being able to provide advice in private, it's quite an experience to be writing an opinion and knowing that every word will go out there in public and will be subject to scrutiny. That's just how it is. It takes a bit of adjustment, but that is a good thing. So there are a lot of opportunities to develop your legal skills. It is a very different working environment. In some respects, it's another world relative to the bar. But I would say it's a good place to work, and it's a decision that I have not had any cause to regret at all. I'm happy to take questions at a later point, but that's all I want to say for just now. Thank you very much.
Okay, we hand over to Sheriff Emidio.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to explain a little bit of the work of the Judicial Institute. I'll start just by saying something about the Judicial Institute for those who may not be aware of its role. It is the principal vehicle by which the Lord President fulfills his statutory duty in relation to the provision of judicial training. It covers all tiers of the judiciary in Scotland. We're based in Parliament House, and we have both offices and a learning suite for course delivery within the building. I'm seconded full-time along with the Deputy Director, Sheriff Cottam. There is a Judicial Institute board which oversees our work, and that is chaired by Lady Drummond, and the Vice Chair is Lord Colbeck. Again, these are examples of some of the roles which, as Lord President said, senators are asked to undertake. We provide an induction course for new senators, which will probably extend over 5 days. The course aims to help the new senator to make the transition from an earlier career, whether that is elsewhere in the judiciary or in the profession. On each occasion that we deliver it, we have some scope to adjust the exact parameters of the course to take account of the prior experience of the new senators, once we know who they're going to be. The training provided by the Judicial Institute is judge-led. That's a very important principle. We've run senator inductions in 2022, 2023 and 2024. On each occasion, we've looked critically at the content of the course and made changes to try and make it work as well as it can for those who are embarking on this new and important phase of their careers. I expect our chair to have significant input in the planning of the 2026 induction, which at present is scheduled for mid-June. The course itself will look at the range of work that a new senator will expect to undertake. A significant number of serving senators, including the Lord President and the Lord Justice Clerk, are likely to contribute to the content of the course because essentially it's judge-led. They will provide insight into the work of the senator at a high level of sophistication. There will also be other external contributions. There will be assigned pre-course reading and a number of practical exercises for completion in advance. You will get feedback on that work during the courses. The course content will address the work of the High Court. On the criminal side, on the civil side, there will be material in respect of judicial review, commercial work, family work and personal injury. There will also be sentencing exercises that will address a number of the scenarios that you can expect to encounter in the High Court that may be of some complexity. If you come to be on the course, you can expect to be active participants in the induction process, and will have to contribute in a range of ways that are intended to help you prepare for your new role. The activities and tasks will be designed to promote critical thinking, reflection, and problem solving. The work is done in the Learning Suite, which is intended to be a safe and collegiate space. The Judicial Institute also maintains, separate from its coursework, the Judicial Hub, which is our intranet. This is a very important part of our activities, and it's accessible, in fact, 24/7. All the pre-course work will be assigned on the Hub, to which you'll be given access in good time to allow you to deal with it before you come to start the course. Substantial materials were provided to you post-course, which are designed to assist you in the transition into this new judicial role. These also will be made available to you on the Hub. We work regularly to streamline the briefing papers and other documents, which will be your main source of ongoing guidance, so that they are kept as relevant and up to date as possible. I want to say something about the support which the Judicial Institute provides after induction. We also deliver courses for serving senators, as the Lord President mentioned, and these continue across the year. For instance, next week we will run an interactive judicial writing workshop for 11 Outer House judges. On a week past Saturday, on 22nd of November, there was an all-day judicial conference which was attended by almost all senators. The subject matter covered current and topical issues relating to the operation of the prison system and the role of the media in our courts. You can expect us to be looking seriously at questions around cybersecurity and the development of AI in the coming period. In addition, it's perhaps worth mentioning also as an important example that to supplement training and trauma-informed judging, we have a course which looks at the complexities that arise in sexual offences cases. The focus there is on the management of particularly cross-examination, in the context of the Rape Shield legislation in sections 274 and 275 of the Criminal Procedure Scotland Act 1995. This is, as many will know, a fast evolving area. We will make adjustments to take account of the evolving case law and indeed the coming into force of the very important Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Act of this year, all of which will have to be written prior to the start of the course in the middle of next year. And you are likely to be, if you're a new senator, asked to attend that course within a short period of coming into post. Lastly, I want to mention some other important materials which we provide on the Judicial Hub. The Jury Manual is a vital resource for the judiciary and for the practitioners. A high-level committee, which is chaired currently by Lady Drummond, and which comprises 4 senators, 3 sheriffs, keeps it under regular review. There is also a preliminary hearings bench book, which is a vital resource on the criminal side. We've recently published a new edition of the Equal Treatment Bench Book, which contains a great deal of very important and practical information about the conduct of the courts. All of these materials are written by serving judges and sheriffs. Perhaps one day you too will contribute to that work. Thank you for listening to me, and I think I now hand over to Lady Haldane.
You do indeed. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. As was said at the outset of this evening's event, I am a senator, and I'm one of the judicial members of the Judicial Appointments Board, and I will also be one of the panel members for this upcoming round. So I'm very conscious that this is something of a graveyard slot, and you're all attending late in the day, but I want to share some insights about the JABS application process. And hopefully provide some useful information that you can deploy if you are considering applying. So as has already been explained to you right at the outset, you now know a little bit about the outlined timetable for this competition, and you've also been told where the key documents can be found. So can I just echo what was said about taking the time to read all of those documents carefully as they set out very important guidance and contain lots of useful information that you'll find of assistance before you embark upon the process. But turning then to the application form itself, that has 4 main parts. The first is personal information, and that includes questions about eligibility, your education and career history. And then the next thing is the personal statement. And as Mr. Montgomery has already explained to you, this is a significant part of the form, and we do encourage you to take the time to provide as much information in this section as you can. Bear in mind that throughout the application and interview process, the panel is essentially engaged on an evidence gathering process, and that will allow us to be satisfied ultimately that a potential candidate has the requisite skills and abilities to allow them to perform this role successfully. So bearing that in mind, the next part of the form that you will come to is self-assessment. And that itself has 2 parts to it. Firstly, legal competence, and then personal and judicial qualities. And you'll also be asked a number of questions about good character and conduct. So for most applicants, we found that the self-assessment is the hardest part of the application, because you'll need to tell us in that part why you are applying for the role and provide examples that demonstrate each of the criteria that the board has agreed are important for the role of senator. Then on the legal assessment, the legal skills of candidates will be assessed in 2 stages. Firstly, at the application stage, and then secondly, during the course of the interview. So let's look firstly at the legal aspects of the application form itself. The first question in the self-assessment section covers legal skill, and you'll be required to give examples that demonstrate your legal knowledge and your skills in the interpretation, analysis and application of the law. In addition to that, you must submit 3 examples of your legal writing, which will be assessed alongside this, as well as outlining your experience in different areas of the law and significant cases with which you might have been involved. Now, I expect that what might be at the forefront of many of your minds is the question, how are the examples scored? Well, the first point to note is that only legally qualified panel members score these sections. The lay members can and do read the legal material in the application form, but they don't contribute to the legal score. However, lay members may and do consider the legal answers when scoring other professional qualities, for example, communication skills. Similarly, the written work that you provide will be read by all markers, not only the legally qualified panel members who will use this to contribute towards the score, but also the lay members can and do read this part to look for pieces of evidence that will contribute towards other parts of the assessment process. This may sound a fairly obvious and trite thing to say, but please remember the importance of reading the question and answering that question. When panel members are scoring these applications, we can only award marks for the skills set out in the explanatory information provided by you. Now, you may, of course, be wondering what a good example looks like from the perspective of scoring. So I'm just going to give you a couple of very brief and non-prescriptive examples of the sort of thing that we might be looking for, just simply to give you a flavour of how this might be approached. So imagine the scenario where an applicant explains that they prepared for a complex commercial arbitration, they mastered the financial details, they challenged the opposing expert's valuation over 2 days of hearings, and ultimately persuaded the tribunal to adopt their client's position. So that, you might think, demonstrates strong advocacy skills and perhaps a certain amount of determination. But however, importantly, from that description alone, it's hard to assess the candidate's understanding or application of legal principles. And without insight into how they interpreted the law or structured their legal arguments or the analysis that they employed, the example wouldn't, in and of itself, as I've described it to you, score highly for legal analysis. And then in another example, suppose an applicant writes that they have handled cases in every major court and tribunal, perhaps from employment tribunals to the Court of Session, to the Inner House, and perhaps the Sheriff Appeal Court. And they might state that that demonstrates their legal knowledge and interpretive ability, which might well be true. No doubt judges in those courts and tribunals will have seen their skills deployed at first hand. However, from the panel's perspective, all we have to work with are your assertion or statement and not the detail of what you actually did or how you applied the law. So without these sorts of specifics, the panel cannot independently assess your reasoning or your skills at legal analysis. So despite presenting an obvious impressive depth of experience, that's not an example that we could give particularly high scores to. So naturally flowing from that, you might well be asking, well, what and then are we looking for? So what we actually need are concrete examples of situations that demonstrate and evidence an applicant's legal knowledge and skill. So have a think about the examples that I've just given you, and then think about this one where a hypothetical candidate has said that in a judicial review, the issue was about a statutory duty and whether and to what extent that applied. My opponent relied on a leading case. I examined the legislation, found a key distinction as well as an English authority in which the same distinction had been made in legislation with UK-wide application. I argued that the leading case was not applicable and that the approach taken in the case I had identified should be followed instead. My client was ultimately successful. So this example gives the panel something concrete to assess: how the candidate approached the legal reasoning, how they interpreted legislation, and how they used case law to support their argument before the court. So that's just one very broad example, but please do bear in mind that there are many ways of providing concrete, accessible information. There is no single prescribed way to complete the form. We will read whatever you send us to see if it gives us the information that we need. However, if you don't provide some relevant, accessible information, or put another way, evidence, we simply can't give you the marks that you will need in order to progress in this competition. So think carefully about the examples that you give. What was the situation and what was required of you? What did you do and what was the outcome? Can I also just mention at this point that if you happen to be a candidate who has applied before, please can I suggest that you take time to read the information in each part of the application. And that's because the application process is constantly evolving in light of experience and, we hope, on each occasion improved. After each competition, there's a discussion about what worked well and what did not. So there will be changes to the requirements, and Mr. Montgomery's already mentioned this to you at the outset, but there will be changes in the requirements or format of this application round compared to those that have gone before. So please, can I urge you not to simply resubmit the same information as you might have done on a previous occasion, because you may miss out on information or the opportunity to provide information that would help with your application. Moving on then to the second part of the application, applicants must also send 3 examples of their written work. And the question again from this is whether the written work shows that the applicant's knowledge of the law and their skills and competence in the interpretation and application of the law. So, for example, an applicant may have prepared a well thought out and carefully crafted child welfare report and made recommendations perhaps to assist the court in deciding what the arrangements for contact or residence should be. Now that's certainly, without doubt, a very important piece of written work prepared for the court and within a legal context. But, and this isn't necessarily the case in every single occasion, but more often than not, these sorts of reports contain little or no reference to the law and don't involve any analysis of the law. So they may provide evidence they may not provide the evidence of legal knowledge and skills in the interpretation on or analysis of the law that we would be looking for in our evidence gathering exercise. Of course, from time to time, such reports may contain analysis of a particular legal point, and in that case, it may turn out to be a very good example. But I just mentioned that simply to encourage you to think carefully about the sort of written work that you are offering for assessment, and consider how that written work might assist you in progressing in the competition. When you provided selected when you have selected the particular examples of your written work, you'll also need to tell us why you chose those particular examples. So there is a section on the application form asking why the written examples that you've chosen demonstrate the legal skill and knowledge. So this again is an opportunity for you to explain why you chose that example, which will help us understand the significance of the work that you have selected. Think also carefully about whether you have chosen the best example for the job. We will all, I'm sure, from our experience and our legal careers over a number of years, have examples of written work that we may rightly be particularly pleased with or proud of for one reason or another. But you perhaps just need to pause and think whether, nevertheless, this piece of work that you have chosen really highlights the relevant skills that we are looking for. So a piece of work that you hold dear, or about which you may be very proud, and perhaps rightly proud, may not on reflection be the right one for this particular purpose. So choose carefully, thinking about the purpose of providing that particular example. Now, another important matter to mention in relation to the written work is that there is a word limit. And it's really important that you stick to that word limit. So the word limit for each of the three written work examples in this round will be 2,000 words for each example. Again, can I encourage you please to carefully read the question and bear that in mind. The word limit will be strictly adhered to, so we won't read anything that exceeds the 2,000 word limit. And that may mean that we've only read part of the document that you've submitted, which could mean, again, that you don't have the opportunity fully to assess the work that you've done. You can, of course, and you are very welcome to submit a document that runs to a far longer word count than 2,000 words. But if you do that, you must identify the section or sections within the word limit that you want us to consider. And you simply do that by highlighting the relevant section. And of course, if you don't do that, what will happen is the panel will simply begin at the beginning and read on until the 2,000 word limit is reached, and then we'll have to stop. And that, of course, may mean that we haven't actually got to the important part of the document that you really wanted us to pay particular attention to. So I'm afraid we are strict about the word limit, and that applies to all candidates. So that's a very important point to ask you to think carefully about. You'll also be asked about some questions. You'll also ask some questions about your experience in different areas of the law, and also for details of 5 significant cases that, in your view, exemplify your legal skills. So it's important to be as clear and honest as you can be in answering these questions, and give as much detail as possible within the relevant word limits for each section. What then comes next? Well, if you are invited for interview, then purely legal aspects of that part of the process will be examined and discussed with you in the form of case studies. Now, sometimes people wonder why we have these case studies, and the reason for them is that at the interview stage, we want to know more about the candidate's legal knowledge and skills. So at the application form stage, of course, candidates can choose their own examples. So the board is reading a very wide variety of information and documents from candidates, and most will choose examples, understandably and rightly, from the area of law with which they are most familiar. But once we get to the interview stage, we have to compare how candidates perform on the same task across the board. So we ask each candidate to prepare and present the same case studies, whatever their particular background. The case study will be set by a legal or judicial member of the board. There's no prescribed format, but generally there will be a scenario and some competing legal submissions. Typically, the candidate will either speak about how they would address the problem were they sitting as a judge, or they may be asked to present their decision as if they were the judge. And they then may be asked some follow-up questions once they have presented on this particular case study. Applicants receive some information about the case study, usually about a week in advance. And then this allows each candidate to prepare what they're going to say and gives the candidates who are not necessarily so familiar with the particular area of law time to do some research and prepare more thoroughly for that part of the interview. Because it's important, of course, that nobody is at a particular disadvantage compared to other candidates who may have practiced or have familiarity with that particular area. Very commonly, some additional information is provided on the day of the interview. So if you can incorporate this new information into your prepared answer, that may be very helpful. But I want to emphasize that none of this is done with an intention to try and catch people out or to try and wrong foot candidates in any way. The purpose of giving additional on-the-day information is simply to see how candidates are able to adapt and deal with last-minute changes or additional information which comes to hand, which is, of course, replicating a very common scenario in the actual day-to-day job. Just as there is a word limit for the written work, there is also a time limit for the initial answer to the case study. So, for example, you may have 10 minutes to present your decision on the particular problem, and that might be followed by 5 or 10 minutes for questions, just to explore with you further what your thinking was and why you came to that particular decision. We do, again, adhere strictly to these time limits. And the reason for that is that so that no candidate is at disadvantaged or gains a particular advantage over any other candidate. So you can expect to be stopped when the time limit expires, and don't be troubled by that, because some, if not all, candidates find themselves in the same situation. So what that does mean, though, that it's helpful if you can plan your answer in advance and be sure that you can try and get across as much of the key information as you wish to get across within the allocated time limit. Now, of course, being concise is important as a lawyer, no matter what area of the law you're engaged in. But do remember the purpose of this case study. It's your chance to show us what you can do. So, to give you an example, if you were simply to come in and say, well, having considered this material, I would adjourn the case to another day, or I would refuse the motion, that doesn't really give us any legal reasoning to assess. So we need to understand why you reached the decision that you did. So explain your reasoning so far as you can within the time limit, so that the panel can properly evaluate your skills and give you the best score possible for your case study. The guidance, the online guidance, provides for more information about what we're looking for under this head. So do use your answer to demonstrate those qualities that you have at the highest possible level. So the case studies are designed to let you show us at interview that you understand and can apply the relevant area of law, even if you did not have particular prior or some little or no experience in that particular area. They also give you an opportunity to demonstrate your skills of legal analysis when faced with a practical problem, and perhaps importantly, how you can take the skills that you already possess and translate those across into an area with which you are less familiar. Returning then to the application form, let's have a quick look at how we assess the evidence of the personal and judicial qualities required. Firstly, some practical advice about completing the form, building on what we've already talked about in relation to the legal sections. Do give yourself time to think about and complete your application. It may be that you're very experienced in this, but unless you are very experienced at this process, it's really not something that you can do in one evening. So I would really give you the strongest possible encouragement not to think of it in that way, and think of it as something that you do need to devote some time to. Applications are submitted on a portal on our website, and you can save an application as you progress through it and return to it as often as you like. So please don't feel you're under pressure to rush through it and complete it all in one sitting. That's very much not the case. Also, you can cut and paste from a Word document, so do take the opportunity to spell check what it is that you want to say, and you can obviously do that in a Word document. And perhaps as a cautionary note, I should say that you might be surprised to learn how often doing a simple spell check is something that is not done in the application process. So in the run-up to applying, keep note of any interesting or unusual situations as they happen. So that will help. That will mean that you're not trying to think of something urgently, as you're getting to the last day for the application window. For each personal and judicial quality, you'll need to give an example showing how you meet the particular criterion. If you think more than one example will strengthen the evidence that you have to offer, that's absolutely fine. But make sure that each example has enough detail to enable the panel to perform a proper assessment of it. Sometimes giving too many examples often means that they're not explained fully. So by all means, provide more than one, but think carefully about the ones that you do wish to offer. Please read the requirements closely. We need to know what you actually did in a specific situation, not just I always do that, or that's my habitual practice, or sometimes perhaps this is something I'm always known for. Please give us concrete examples of your actions and decisions that you took so that we can properly evaluate your skills. Throughout the form, I would also encourage you to be absolutely honest about gaps in your experience. Don't be worried about that. Demonstrating self-awareness and insight is generally considered to be a strength. And so that if you can show that you are aware of these particular gaps and have given some thought about how you might go about the process of bridging the gaps, or perhaps indeed what steps you've taken so far, all the better for that. So please don't be anxious about that aspect of matters. There's also a natural tendency only to share or put forward examples where you have been wholeheartedly successful in achieving something. But sometimes an example which didn't have an entirely positive ending, it can be very powerful and can sometimes be the best example. Particularly if you can show that you've reflected on what didn't work on that particular occasion, and if you've considered how and why the situation turned out in the way that it did. So let's assume you've made it through the application process and you've been invited to come for an interview. In that scenario, I think echoing something Lady Ross said earlier on, please don't think that it's just enough to reread your application. Please make sure that you've devoted enough time to preparing for your interview. There will be materials to consider and prepare, and you will also need to prepare for the questions that you'll be asked. So with that in mind, it's important that you don't use all of your examples in your application form. Think about things that you might be able to hold in reserve and that you might be able to tell the panel more about at the interview stage that will give us, again, yet more evidence and insight into you and your experience and skills. Now, what does the interview process involve? Well, as you've already learned from the speakers earlier this evening, you will be interviewed by a panel of 6. With 3 judicial and legal members and 3 lay members. Also in the room on the day, there will be a note taker. You've obviously already heard something about the case studies, and these will form the first part of the interview. The second part of the interview will focus on the personal and judicial qualities. All parts are equally important, and we recognise and understand that the interview process is a very demanding one. But it needs to be to show us and to enable us to test your competence and gain as much insight as we can into your potential for this role. If additional stages are needed at interview, then those will clearly be outlined to you in your invitation to interview letter. Generally, the second stage of the interview is a general interview covering the personal and judicial qualities. And there will often be a mix of scenario type questions and questions designed to test how your experience matches the required criteria. So these questions typically will ask you to, for example, tell us about a time when, or give us an example of a situation where you did such and such, or had such a particular experience. So it's always good to have a range of experiences to draw on, but try not to rely too heavily on these. We definitely don't want you just to come and reel off a whole load of examples verbatim. We recognise that these interviews can be daunting, and even the most experienced people sometimes feel under extreme pressure in these situations. We will do our best to put you at ease, but we know it's challenging, and you're always invited to take a moment to consider the question and your response, rather than, as it can very understandably and often be the case, rushing into giving an answer just to get it out of the way. Do take time to reflect. There's no issue with that. We're very happy if you want to do so. So a few final thoughts before I hand back to Mr. Montgomery. Please do remember, it's perhaps obvious to some extent, but this is a competitive process. Whilst your application will be assessed against the criteria, it will also be considered alongside other applications. So you need to give yourself the best chance to stand out. So ultimately, what you need to do perhaps is ask yourself these questions. Are you ready? How well do you understand the role for which you are applying? How would you make it work in practice if you were to be appointed? Have you thought about whether you would be a good fit for the role? What will you bring to it? What will you need to work on? Because every single applicant will have something that they need to work on. Can you demonstrate in your application that you've thought about these things? What steps have you taken to plug any gaps that you might have identified? Are the examples that you've chosen the very best ones to illustrate how you meet the various criteria? Are you able to commit enough time to the process to do the application form and do the interview process justice? I hope that many, if not all of you, will be able to answer all of these questions in the affirmative, and I hope and look forward to seeing many of your applications in due course. Can I just take this opportunity to thank all of you attending this evening for your interest in the Senator role and the upcoming application process. And as I say, we do look forward to seeing your applications in due course. I'll hand back now to Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Lady Haldane. Andrew, do we have any questions from those attending?
Not at the moment.
Okay, I mean, having done these in the past, it's not uncommon for us not to get any questions on the evening. But as I said at the beginning, if with mature reflection, something occurs to you that you want to raise, please email us at the JABS mailbox, and we'll be able to look at that, answer it, and add it to the frequently asked questions. We hope you found this session helpful, and we look forward to getting a significant number of high quality applications as a result. My thanks to Lord Pentland, Lady Haldane, Lady Ross and Sheriff Emidio for their contributions this evening, and to staff colleagues in JABS and the GO for organising it. A recording of the event will be available on the website. And I would just like to say thank you very much for your interest and good evening. Thank you.